Hello everyone, this is Taryn with Wonderfully Made Handcrafting, and welcome to Witness to the Wonder from By the Will for God. This is their Advent kit for this December, and I'm really excited because I'm doing something a little bit different this year, and I'm going to be working through a memory decks system. So I have this box from Precious Memory Boxes, Bobby, and I'm just so excited to use this. So I'm going to make memory decks cards for all the days. I hope I can fit each one in. It might get a little chunky, but we're gonna make it work. And yeah, let's go start making the title card. Okay, so first thing is I'm using this cracked leather distress heavy stock paper. I just want a lot of texture on this little card. Since I know it's going to be a littler piece, I want to make sure I can get as much texture in it as I can. My initial size of this card is 4.5 inches wide by 3 3/4 tall. I want to make sure to cover all the white of this cardstock. I want to have some nice brown tones in it. So I'm starting off with some antique linen distress oxide, and then I continue with some tea dye and also some frayed burlap. And then I'm going to actually throw in some vintage photo regular distress ink. And then I'm going to finish it off with a little purple of the Seedless Preserves Distress Oxide, and that's going to bring in the same tones that I have in my Memory Decks box. Now I just recently picked up these mini distress inks in the neutral color collection, and I'm really glad I did because they add a lot of depth when you're creating cards like this. And it's easy because I use neutrals a lot, obviously, and browns, so it's helpful to have those little inks on hand. Now for most of these layers, I did try to dry them in between each layer. That helps these colors not mix and get muddy. So once this card is good and dry, I'm going to bring it over to my Big Shot machine. And I have this wood grain embossing folder from Tim Holtz. And like I said, I know I'm not going to see much of that wood grain at all, but I'm just doing this for the texture alone. Plus I have that cracked leather look already, so it kind of just adds more texture rather than that wood grain look necessarily. But I am going over with just a makeup brush and some of that vintage photo distress ink to kind of bring out those lines a little bit more. I'm also going to go around the edges of this card with that vintage photo distress ink. This will add some definition and is just a standard that I do for most ephemera pieces and cards. So here we go with my layering bits, and these were the initial ones that I thought I wanted to use on this card. I really liked this hem piece that was made out of fabric. This was a little added bonus. And then I definitely wanted Witness to the Wonder on this card, but it just wasn't working for me with those greens. And so I decided to take out the sticker for the kit, and I'm going to place that on some white cardstock and then fussy cut it out just a little bit closer to the words and see if that might work better for this card. Like I said before, if you know me, you know I'll be distressing the outer edges of this. So I take that vintage photo again to distress this up a little bit. I don't want it to look too stark compared to the background, and I'm bringing in that vintage look. I also decide that I'm going to save that fabric hem for a different date and just grab a carol or a Christmas hymn from my regular hymn book to use. I want to make sure I have a lot of layering pieces without taking away from the background. So I grab this design paper that I had picked up from a shop in Atlanta, and it has these plants like mixed into the paper. I forget what kind of paper this is called. But anyways, it has these plants and it works perfectly with this kit. I am so glad that I have saved this and can't wait to use it on other cards. So I'm just going to layer that down a little bit behind the hymn book paper, and I'm also going to add a little bit of this velvet trim ribbon. My Barely Arts glue was a little jammed up, so I end up taking that pin and it works wonderfully again. And then I am layering down all these pieces. I am going to add a little bit of ink to the outer edges of this paper, and then I look at my hymn book paper and notice it has some yellow tones to it of aging, but I wanted a little bit more of that brown look, so I just added that ink again, and I will layer all this down together. With this velvet trim, I'm going to use my tiny attacher to do some faux sewing. That's going to hold down those folds as I add glue to the card. And I'm going to tuck that in underneath the hymn book paper. I'll make sure to add a ton of glue down first, and then I'm also going to add a little bit of glue on top of that velvet trim to hold the hymn book paper on top of it. So now I can flip over that cardstock and cut all the excess paper off. I do want that Witness to the Wonder in the middle, but beforehand I'm going to round all the corners to this Memory Decks card. I really like the look of that, and it helps things not get caught on the corners. But this last corner, because of the bulk of that trim and everything in that last corner, it kind of got stuck and didn't get in there tight enough. And so it messed up that corner. So I had to cut off the whole edge, and then I'm coming back to round those two last corners again. It doesn't really matter too much. It doesn't take away too much of the width of this card. It still looks fine. But that is something I'm definitely going to do beforehand next time. I couldn't create this main card for the devotional without grabbing the new winter lace stencil. This is one of my favorite stencils from By the Wall for God, and I just couldn't live without using it. So I grabbed this, and then also the Snowfall grit paste from Tim Holtz. This was a Christmas release, so unfortunately once it's sold out, it is gone. But it is a grit paste that goes on white but dries clear with some glitter to it, so it adds a really cool light look to the background once it's dry. I'm going to add some foam tape to the back of this Witness to the Wonder sticker. I definitely want it to be prominent on the card and the first thing you see. But while that grit paste is drying, unfortunately you cannot dry it with a heat tool. So I'm going to work on the back of this card as much as possible. There's nothing necessarily that I want on the back of the card, but I definitely want it to be covered. I don't want to see the white and all the inks kind of bleeding through. So I'm using my scissors, the little tip of my scissors, to kind of push it down around where the grit paste is, and then I'm going to cut that out around. Now, as you can see this grit paste drying, you can tell that it's taking on the color that's behind it, especially in those inked areas. That is because this grit paste dries clear, like I said before, and I really end up liking the look of it. At first, I was a little sad that it wasn't white anymore. I mean, I knew it wasn't going to be, but it adds a really cool look when you tilt the card back and forth. I also was putting that Witness to the Wonder sticker in the center of this card, but it was kind of getting lost and it didn't look as prominent. So I decided to bring some more blue tones with this paper pack, and I am distressing the edges yet again and adding that behind the sticker. Now it does take a bit away from the background, but I think it's worth it with the layering pieces. When I glued down this blue piece of paper, I realized that I glued it more to the right-hand side of the card than centered, which I had originally hoped for, but I'm just going to go with it, and it ends up looking fine anyhow. But I do notice when I put this down that I need something in the upper right-hand corner, so I grabbed these mirrored stars that were from the Christmas Ideology release, and I love these stars. I'm using them a lot on the accordion book that I've been working through. So I'm going to kind of place them in 3, but I have noticed and found a tip that I put the placement down first, and then I'm going to mark little dots so I put the glue in the right place. But first off, I'm going to grab this icicle crackling paste. This came in the 2-pack with the Snowfall grit paste that was a Ranger Christmas release. And I really like adding these to the stars because it adds a little bit more aging and imperfection to the stars. It'll add a little bit of crackle to it. But while I'm waiting for that icicle crackle paste to dry, I'm going to add a little bit of brown to the back side. And then I'm going to work on punching this Memory Decks card. Now I know not to wait to this point to make that punch. It was really hard to punch that out and a little bit tricky. So next time I'll do that before I have all the layers. So those icicle little stars have dried, so I'm going to add that to the page. And then this card is basically done. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me over on Instagram at Wonderfully Made Handcrafting. I'll be doing videos for the rest of the 24 days of this Advent study, so make sure to check back here, and I'll link all the supplies I used down below. I hope you have a great day. Bye.